So hi, I'm going to tell you a story about a orc and his family. It's called Roast by Berserk. Filgy, an orc newly-wed bride, felt cold and shivered inside the large wooden hut. She was with child and wanted to warm up. The fire in the fireplace had died down to embers. To see what she was doing, she lit candles around the altar to the one-eyed orc god Trojan. Filgy's husband Norat was a powerful warrior priest of the Claw Smasher clan. Both he and Filgy's mother were asleep in their beds. Suddenly, lightning rattled the hut. Filgy smelt wood burning. It was burning her eyes and making her sputter, choke, and cough. Then she glanced up. She saw the roof was letting in dark gray smoke, and it billowed in waves into the room. Then Filgy could see flames starting to burn the house. Fire! Fire! Filgy tried to raise the dead. She ran and shook both awake. Nurat jumped up and grabbed the spear, then noticed the lightning outside and relaxed. He spied his lit altar and thought of his god Trogroden. What did he do to tick him off? Was it the affair he had with Bruja? He remembered last week he was fighting in a battle against the humans when he lost some good orcs. Some were his best friends. The males of the clan said he was not powerful enough to protect them anymore. They needed to get a new priest. Oh, how that ticked him off. The family ran outside into the cold drizzle, and Nurat turned around and went back into the blaze. The females yelled for him to come back, but he refused. Soon he came trotting out with his altar, but without the candles. The orcs watched as the house burst into a huge fireball. Egha, the mother, felt the heat of the blaze on her old wrinkled face. She counted on her one paw the possessions she accumulated over her lifetime. Who did this? Whoever's fault this is, I will eat their entrails. Egha shook her fist at the burning house. Filgy put her hand to her mouth and turned purple. Later, when the fire smothered out and wisps of smoke rose from the remains, did they return from taking short, fitful naps in the forest and enter the ruins. The orcs examined the things inside to see if anything could be salvaged, but everything was gone except Nurat's sword, which lay against a partially charred wall. A trained warrior, Nurat noticed two arrowheads in the middle of the floor among the ash. He picked one up. It still felt warm, and he thought it was made by elves, one of the orcs' enemies. He thought that lightning did not do this, and it was not because he displeased his god. It was because the elves hated the Claw Smasher clan, and they wanted the leader, him, dead. Look here, the elves did it. This arrowhead proves they were here, and they started the fire. They must have wanted me dead. Orcs and elves were like night and day. Orcs were a sloppy and hated nature. Elves were the exact opposite. Egha looked at the arrowhead, and then she looked away. Nurat could tell his mother-in-law was ticked off. I want to eat them alive, she screamed, shaking with rage. Filgy ran into the bushes, and the other two could hear her vomiting. Later, after composing herself, she came back in from the woods. Please, Mama, I still have morning sickness, and for some reason eating entrails or other things make me sick to the belly. Filgy burped loudly. Nurat realized that his family was not going to make it on a journey this time to get a few dwarfs to build a stone house. His wife was ready to have a baby, and his mother-in-law was too feeble. Nurat needed some orcs to take care of his family while he was away. He took them to the newly appointed priest healer of the clan. It went totally against his grain. He hated the males who nominated this inferior orc to take his place. They went into the establishment. As soon as they got to his hut, Nurat knocked violently on the door because he hated the orc. Nurat heard what sounded like a chair falling backwards, and footsteps approached the heavy door. It squeaked open, and a large snout with a huge underbite and beady eyes looked at the family. Oh, it's you, Nurat. What do you want? He asked, spitting saliva as he spoke. Filgy held her nose and made a face. Our house was burnt down last night, and I need you to watch over my women while I'm gone to find dwarfs to build our house with stone, Nurat said. What do I look like, a babysitter? Find someone else. He slammed the door. Suddenly a young orc who had no family rushed by. He caught a bloody human head, then threw it to his friend, who threw it back to him. They laughed, then started kicking it around. Nurat thought he could use a messenger to run to the dwarf's caves, and Smegnet would be the most reliable to do the job. Then he would watch over his women himself. Smegnet, I need you. I'll give you my sword if you run an errand for me. Smegnet ran over and eyed the sword with greed. What would you like me to do? I can't leave my women, and the healer won't help either. I need you to get to the dwarf caves and ask them to come and build me a new house out of stone. I'll watch your women, he said, looking Filgy and Ega over. No, I'd rather have you take a message, and then when you get back, I'll give you my favorite sword. That's not enough. The dwarf caves are a week away. Throw in a day with each of your women, and I'll do it. Nurat knew he really lost all his prestige. Even his women weren't sacred anymore. This really bothered him. He became lost in thought. Ega and Filgy yelled, No, Nurat! Done, Nurat finally said. The two men charged, slammed into each other, and pushed violently for about 5 minutes and laughed. It had been agreed upon. Ega and Filgy stood with their arms folded over their giant breasts. They seethed quietly. After all, they were women and inferior to the men. Nurat unfortunately copied the rest of the males and women. The women thought. Smegnet left on his way to get the dwarfs the next day. He winked at the women as he strode past. The women threw dung at him in protest. Nurat, we need a shelter because Filgy is about to have her child soon, Ega said. I have a plan, Nurat said. Nurat grabbed his sword and asked the other orc men who stood around a stolen wagon and guzzled and slopped human ale all over themselves if they wanted to go to war with the elves because of what they did to him. The other orcs refused and told him it was his problem. Nurat angrily stomped and headed toward the elf village. Unfortunately, he took his family. The first house they came across was inside of a giant tree. Nurat bellowed at the resident to come out. He wanted to kill him. He was fit to burst. Arrows whizzed past him from the house window. Nurat stomped to the front door, the top of which came to his shoulders, and pulled it from the hinges. Wood chips were flying. Inside, the only elf shook with fright and fled through a back door and into the forest beyond. When Nurat looked at the arrowheads from the elf, they were not the same as what he had found at his old residence. The family decided to move in. Nurat rammed the altar inside the doorway, getting it stuck there. They scraped their heads on the ceiling and had to suck in their bellies to move around at first. Finally, they found a corner to sit in. Filgy lay in the bed, even though her feet stuck out on the end, and covered herself up under the silky blankets. Ega decided to see what kind of food was in the larder. Nurat examined the arrowheads in the firelight of the fireplace. The elf arrow was streamlined and elegant, and the one he found in the ruins was sloppy and probably hastily made. He sat on the stoop, and his back started to feel very hot. A loud yelp, and he heard them chop, chop. Ega brought out dead raw meat for everyone. The orcs growled and chewed with their mouths open, making loud smacking noises. Then Nurat picked up a nearby stick and picked his molars. Filgy started to smell something horrible, and she started to throw up. Nurat's back was on fire. He danced around trying to put out his beautiful backside, or his painful backside. He ended up knocking pots and pans off the ceiling hooks and rammed his elbow through a plate glass window, cutting his arm deeply. Nurat began to heal the gray and green skin. Suddenly, elegant and streamlined arrows came flying through the window, shattering the glass. Nurat looked out and counted about 20 elves, all shooting longbows. Then Ega was hit by an arrow in the arm, and Filgy got hit in the foot. Nurat healed the injuries. He also had the powers of a surgeon. Cut open, break bones, and bleed. He used those on the elf warriors, his enemies. Soon the small battle was over, and a few elves lay on the ground moaning in agony. A large orc woman stomped into the area carrying a bow and crude arrows. some of which were wrapped with cloth. She also carried a lit torch. Nurat knew her. Bruja, why did you burn down our house? Nurat yelled out the window. If I can't have you, then no one can, Bruja yelled back. I don't want to hurt you, Bruja, and I can't be with you anymore. Then you will die. She lit an arrow and put it into her bow. Bruja pulled back the string. Filgi and Egha peered out into the broken windows. Nurat, we are married. Why are you seeing this thing? Filgi freaked out. Nurat, you will leave this house or I will kill you myself, Egha screamed. Meanwhile, the flaming arrows screamed toward the house. The two women pushed Nurat up against the altar in the doorway. They pushed so hard it became unstuck. Nurat crouched down behind the altar as the arrow struck it, and the altar was a blaze of glory. Suddenly, an apparition appeared, and Nurat saw his one-eyed orc god Trogrodin. He beat his chest and bellowed. What is it? What do you want? The god said. Nurat said that he was just getting protection from his god because the crazy orc Bruja wants him dead if he doesn't love her. The god approached Bruja and rubbed around outside her belly and came back to Nurat. He bellowed, Bruja does not have your child, Nurat. Then the god disappeared into thin air. Bruja stood with her mouth open and turned to leave. Other orcs heard the commotion and had seen the apparition. They wanted to see who had conjured their one-eyed god. To their surprise, it was none other than Nurat, who was automatically reinstated as the Glassmaster clan's warrior priest. The other healer just remained the backup because no matter how hard he tried, he was never able to call up the one-eyed orc god like Nurat did. Nurat had his prestige back and his family was happy. When Smeganit came back with the dwarves, he found the whole clan still celebrating Nurat for calling Trogrodin to his aid. In the way he was disappointed that he was not going to be getting anything but the sword for traveling a week to get the little men. Nurat's women were now sacred and off limits. Smelt, though, did revel and dance with Bruja around the large bonfire nevertheless. The end.